Good afternoon, AP Euro students. Today is September the 1st, and today we are going to begin talking about the Renaissance proper as we cruise toward our next test. It is not just that. It is not just that the things that we've gone over before in the last 4 days were not necessary, because trust me, they were. They provided context, and you need that. But today we charge forward into the subject material. We also begin our march towards Christmas. Before we begin, I do want to broach one more subject. If you are in the fourth period, AP Euro fourth period, my largest class, I want to give you my apology for being 10 minutes late the past 2 days. What is going on in here, the World Civ teachers come in here and we collaborate on what we are presenting. We are supposed to, basically all the teachers teach the same thing, be in lockstep, and that takes some coordination. And so they're in here, and suddenly the clock goes by, and I'm into your period. And since we don't have kids here to remind us when to leave, suddenly, and I'm very sorry. So let's talk about the Renaissance, shall we? Today, of course, or rather Friday, your take-home test is due, and probably the next thing we have that's going to count for points is probably going to be the first unit test. So let's get started. That take-home test is very important, because I'll flat out tell you, you're going to see a lot of those questions that you took home and had the answers to. You're going to see them, and please tell me you know where to find the answers. You Google the question, write out the question, Google it, and I'll guarantee you the site will pop up, and the entire test with answers. And so, take the shortcut, find out why the answer is correct, and then get ready for the test. All right, let's continue, shall we? And right there. So yes, as you notice there, Roman numeral 1. This is how we roll. You do know your Roman numerals, don't you? Yeah, Roman numerals look like this: 1, 2, and eventually there's a 3. We won't go over all of them, but I wanted to make the point that Roman numerals was the enumeration system of Europe. Until that's one of the few good things that came out of the Crusades. They brought back a lot of knowledge with them, curiosity, and one of the things they brought with them was that, hey, those Arabs and Persian infidels, they have this numeric system that just blows ours away. Because I don't know if you've ever toyed with Roman numerals, but I guess they're okay to count things. But if you ever want to do any kind of math, adding and subtracting is very difficult. Multiplication and division, forget it. And, they discovered that these Arabs that they were trading with had this, what is it called? Arabic numerals. Actually, the technical name is Indo-Arabic numerals, because the Arabs copied them from the Indians. The Arabs added this number, 0. All right, so let's go on with this. So this unit covers what is considered to be the beginning of the modern era, from about 1450 to the present, the modern era. It is also mostly called the Age of Europe, which once again, as it says there, Age of Europe beginning in 1492, which we discussed yesterday, and ending in 1914. And since we're talking about yesterday, those dates, please, I don't ask you to remember dates per se, but those three, 1453, 1456, and 1492, worth remembering. Yeah, because it is those 3 dates, those 3 occurrences unknowingly that brings in the modern era. So let's talk about that. Roman numeral two. The Renaissance began in Italy. Why Italy? Well, the devastation of the bubonic plague of 1347 hadn't been, in fact, the bubonic plague of 1347 was not the only occurrence of the Black Plague. There were several plagues that occurred both before and after 1347, but nothing like the one that happened in 1347. And so the devastation of that bubonic plague, coupled with the gradual loss of confidence in the preachings and teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, resulted in a rise of ideas, art, and expressions that became known generally as humanism. You say, what does that mean? Well, basically, it means that with the ravages of the Black Plague and the Crusades being a bust, people said, you know what, maybe the church just doesn't have all the answers. Maybe we should live life here on earth and make it a good life. Maybe we should enjoy things for their own sakes, which is the essence of humanism. Humanism is a way of thinking, a philosophy that basically says, let's enjoy our life as it is now. Let's not spend our entire existence waiting for heaven to roll around. Petrarch was known as the father of Renaissance humanism. He was also the guy who coined the phrase the Dark Ages to refer to that period of time we just covered, the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, and he contrasted the Dark Ages with how awesome Rome and Greece were supposed to be. And then when the Renaissance gets started, remember that what they try to do is to recreate Greece and Rome. Much of the inspiration of not only the art but the thinking of the Renaissance was, Greece and Rome. At least what they remembered of Greece and Rome. Okay, so why Italy? Geographically, Rome, in particular, Italy, was located at a convenient refuge for the many people fleeing scholars, artists, thinkers who had fled Constantinople before it fell to the Muslims, the Ottoman Turks, in 1453. And oh yeah, money. If you're going to have art, you've got to have money. End of story. I mean, remember what art is. Art is expression on a medium. Art is enjoyment. And what many people don't realize is that we all support the arts. We all spend money for art. You say, well, I don't spend money for art, Mr. Horton. Well, now you're lying. If you've ever bought a pair of shoes because they're of one style over another style, if you've ever purchased music, whether it be online or in a iPod or whatever, iPod, I really dated myself there, didn't I? But bought music. If you've ever chosen a style of clothes, then you're supporting the arts. If you've gone to a movie, you've definitely supported the arts. A play, a concert. Yeah, okay. And what money did you use to go to the movie? Did you rob your parents' grocery money? Did you rob your grocery money and go to the movies? Answer no. It takes what you call disposable income. In other words, you have to be making enough money to allow yourself some pleasure. And so money and art go together. There's a famous, well, not, it's really not famous, but there is a picture that I gave you before that I'm going to refer to now. Where did that go? Pop up there again. Mr. Pictures under, give me 1 second. Art. Where did I do that? It's not in Art Prize. Maybe it's in Cincinnati Art Museum. Give me a second. I promise not to Nope, that's not it. Ah, there it is. And we open with photos. Now, yeah, you see that? That sculpture. That sculpture is in the Cincinnati Museum of Art. Yeah, the name of it is Industry Protects Art and Music. And what you have here, you have a guy here who's an obvious worker, and he protects these two children. The little boy here has an easel for painting. The little girl has a musical instrument. Notice that there is a sphinx here. And yeah, I mean, that's what it means that to have art, you got to have business, you got to have money. And so, where did that go? Come back, Mr. Orton. Very good. Yes, money. You have to have money. After the decline of the Hanseatic League of Northern Germany, you're all going, what is that? Hanseatic League was a trading alliance in Northern Germany that pretty much dominated trade in Europe during the Middle Ages. It was kind of clunky and slow, but the Italian merchants began to dominate the Mediterranean with profits from the dried salt fish trade. You say, what does that mean? The Italians had learned a method by which they could dry fish, salt the fish down, and then that fish would remain, um, it wouldn't be especially tasty, but it wouldn't spoil. And they traded that with Arab and Middle Eastern merchants, Turks, for spice. They used this commodity to purchase spice and other things, silks, but spice was the thing. Spice was the thing. Now, and here's the thing. A lot of people, I remember when I first started reading about, the Europeans wanted spices. I'm like, what did they do with them? And what are these spices? Are they like, incense for burning? Well, that's actually some of it. But no, the spices they wanted are the same ones you find in your parents' spice cabinet. Same ones: peppers, paprika, cinnamon, bay leaf, uh, garlic, oil of clove, ginger. All of these things. And you say, well, why was that such a big deal? Well, you have to remember that during this particular period of time, the Europeans had no refrigeration. And so what that meant was once they prepared a dish, within a few hours it started to turn. And so how do you don't want to, I mean, if you slaughter an animal, pig, calf, whatever, and you can't eat the whole pig in one meal, what do you do with it? Do you throw it out after one meal? No, they'd try to serve it again in stews or whatever, but it would have this awful taste, rancid taste. And so what they began doing, they began covering up the awful smell, awful taste with spice, peppers. I mean, have you ever tasted any food that is spicy? I'm sure that you have. And these are the spices they're talking about. That strong spice would cover up this awful, you know, basically rotting meat. I can't tell you how many people, and it hasn't been recorded, how many people throughout before refrigeration died of something called botulism. Botulism is a deadly condition that you get from eating rotted meats in particular. And yeah. So anyway, back to the matter at hand. But yeah, spice. In fact, this spice was so valuable that at first these merchants in Italy would sell the spice. Look at what I'm doing with my fingers here. They would count the grains as they sold it. And when they're counting the grains to sell it, that this spice was costing some major money. It was very, very, very profitable, particularly for two cities in Italy, And you're writing Venice, the city with all the gondolas and the canals. Venice, Venice. Yeah. And Genoa, Genoa. Venice and Genoa in Italy. And these two cities actually became the most powerful governing entities in the Mediterranean during the Renaissance, the cities of Venice and Genoa. And that's not to say there weren't others, but Venice and Genoa became so powerful that their navies would blow up anybody else's ships who tried to hone in on the spice trade. All right, these items would be sold at great profit to the rest of Europe. The Italian city-states then became the wealthiest and most powerful in all of Europe. And they guarded that power, trust me. Like I said, if the ships of Venice or Genoa would come upon some other ship that was trying to hone in on that trade, load up with spices, they'd sink the thing. The city of Venice became incredibly powerful. I was actually just watching a Rick Steve video over the weekend about the city of Venice and the opulence and the riches they gained from the spice trade. However, Rome was still the seat of Christendom, Christianity, the most powerful economic and political force of Western Europe, the Roman Catholic Church. The way the church and the wealthier peoples of the Italian peninsula remember that there is no such thing as an Italian nation state until 1873. Underline that in some way, shape, or form. There will be no Italy, there will be no Germany until about 1873. Yeah. Italy unites in the 19th century, as does Germany. And until that time, there is no Italy and Germany. So scratch that in your head. Both Italy and Germany will be kind of a loose confederation of semi-independent feudal states that are supposed to be, and I say supposed to belong to something called the Holy Roman Empire. Say again. So all the city-states of northern Italy and Switzerland and Germany were supposed to belong to this entity called the Holy Roman Empire, which we'll make several references to. But as Jean-Jacques Rousseau once said about the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. It was an attempt by the Roman Catholic Church to, guess what? To recreate Rome, a Christian Catholic Rome. It failed miserably. Okay, so the way the church and the wealthier peoples of the Italian peninsula, remember that there was no such thing. Oh, yeah. The way that these guys recreated themselves, you say, well, what does that mean? Recreated themselves. Had fun, amused themselves, spent their extra income, was to bankroll works of art. You say, what does that mean? It means, like, for example, the de Medici family of Florence, which we'll talk about in a second. The de Medici family of Florence were a powerful banking family who were basically thugs. I mean, they were mafia before there was mafia, who ruled many of the city-states of Italy and tried to make it look like, it was a republic, when actually, once again, they ruled by, if you didn't like what we're doing, you are going to die. They ruled through violence. They really were. They were the mafia of their day. And so, yeah, the de Medici family, Lorenzo de Medici himself bankrolled Michelangelo. You say, what does that mean? It means they paid Michelangelo to come and live inside the de Medici compound. Rich families basically built for themselves small fortresses within the city. And Michelangelo could live within their compound, and they paid him to create art. And then Lorenzo de Medici would have his friends come by, and he would say, oh, look at this, look at that, look at that. And you say, that sounds so dumb. That's not so different. It's not so different than what you do. Think of it. When you buy that first car yourself, and it's the car that you want, you're going to hide it in your garage? No. First thing you're going to do is tool around in it. And why is that car your favorite? Oh, it's favorite because of the way it looks, how big of an engine it has. In other words, something about it that you find aesthetically pleasing and you want to show it off to your friends. Well, the Medicis did that with art. Yeah. They would bankroll artists. And Michelangelo was just one of several. The Lorenzo, also called Lorenzo the Magnificent, who was a big thug, who, by the way, later on, Lorenzo de Medici tried to kill Michelangelo. That's how much work. And Michelangelo had to spend a year literally hiding underground in a small cell until things cooled off. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. Yes, money, money, money. Note that the other industries of Italy were also on the rise. Wool production, printing. Thank you, Johann Gutenberg. Printing, mining, quarrying marble. The oil of commerce lit the lamp of culture. That is, once again, is what this means. The oil of commerce, industry, pays for art. Yeah. Oil of commerce lit the lamp of culture. Families like the Medici family of Florence became powerful bankers and politicians before they were driven out of power by the French when the French invade Italy in 1494, which we'll talk about later. They, the Medici, were replaced by a German family of bankers called the Fuggers. Ah, yes, usury. A word that will definitely be on your test. I don't remember. Is that listed amongst your term? Usury. It's like, usury. You guys are sophomores now. You spend lots of money to go to the prom. You get a date, spend lots of money, rent the tux, get the limo, pay for a wonderful meal, and then you go to prom or homecoming or whatever. And as soon as you go through the door, your date runs like the head's on fire and the rest of them's catching. And you say, she usury. But no, that's not usury. That was me, a long joke to make a point that's a joke. And, yeah. Usury. What is usury? It is a word that will be on your test. And actually, it's a very important word. Usury is another word, is an old word, old-fashioned word. It actually comes from the Bible. Usury is the practice of charging interest on loaned money. Yes, charging interest on loan money. Okay, Mr. Horton, why is that word so important? Well, one of the major themes in modern European history is Jewish history. Yeah, I mean, it is. What has happened to the Jewish ethnicity? Because, and later on, we're going to talk all about what happened to Jews and how did Jews come to live in Europe in such large numbers. We'll talk about that later. But suffice it for now, Jews lived in large numbers in Europe, and for the most part, they were not exactly welcomed. In fact, Jews, and you're writing, Jews were not allowed to play any reindeer games. Or was that? No. Jews were not allowed to engage in the same kinds of employment, crafts, businesses as everybody else did. You say, well, how did they prevent them? Well, one of the things that came out of the Middle Ages was these things called guilds, not fish, not those kind of guilds. Guilds, guilds, and guilds were basically organizations of business. There was a carpenter's guild, there was a shoemaker's guild, there was a glassblower's guild, there was a meat cutter's guild. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For every business, there was a guild in the city. And everybody, the old definition of what are guilds, what were they for, would say, oh, it's to keep up the high quality of the business. No, that wasn't. The purpose of guilds, from the perspective of the members of the guild, was that they wanted to make sure there was not any competition. And so within a particular city, there would be, like, for example, a tailor's guild, people who sew clothing or whatever, produce clothing. And if you walked into that town and you're a good tailor, and I'm just going to open up my own shop over here, and you begin opening up a shop and trying to sell stuff, the members of the guild would, if they were nice, they would just burn down your shop. If they were not nice, you would be found you would be lynched. So yeah, well, these guilds would not allow the Jews to enter any kinds of employment, none. But there was one. There was one type of employment that Jews were not prohibited from, and that is the lending of money. You say, well, why the lending of money? Well, that's very lucrative. Well, the Roman Catholic Church, and if you read back in the New Testament where Jesus says, do not loan money for usury like the Pharisees do, that if somebody asks you for money, you should just give it to them. And so many people interpreted that as Christians could not loan money for interest. And I'm here to tell you, I wish I had you guys sitting in front of me. It'd make a much better point. I'm here to tell you that business then, just like business now, runs on borrowed money. Yeah, the economy today runs on borrowed money, all the way from credit cards, but to any kind of building or undertaking. Taking this building here was built with borrowed money. They sold bonds, which are basically loans that the public invest in. Yeah, it's borrowed money. And people don't loan money for free to be friendly. They loan money for interest. And that interest is called usury. Okay. And like I said, that this was one industry that the Jews were not prohibited from joining. And so before banking became a thing in the Christian community, the Jews had a leg up on it. And here's the other part of that. Bankers who loan you money. How do you feel about people you owe money to? Anybody. How do you feel about people you owe money to? Answer, you don't like them very much. Do you like to see them? You like to hang out with them? You owe money? Because there's always that stigma that you owe this guy money and you need to pay him. And so, yeah, that was another reason not to like Jews. And the other thing is, think of it. What kind of stereotypes are associated with Jews? Now, we don't live up in the Northeast where there's a significant population of Jews. So a lot of you guys will say, I don't know. Jews are supposed to be penny pinchers, tightwads, skinflints, cheaters, all rich, all bankers. You ever watch Family Guy? Family Guy? Yeah. Old Family Guy was good. What they have now is it's too overtly sexual. But the old Family Guy, and trust me, old Family Guy is written by Jews, straight up. And Seth MacFarlane is Jewish, and I forget the name of the actress that plays Lois. She's Jewish as well. And so they make fun of Jews all the time and Jewish stereotypes. And I remember in the early Family Guy, there was this one particular, if you ever watch Family Guy, they'll be talking about something and there'll be a flashback. And I remember Lois and Peter Peter's the main character. We're talking about something and it flashed back. And Lois said, Yeah, but it's better that time you pretended to be Jewish, talking to Peter. And of course, you have a flashback, and there's Peter standing in front of a synagogue, dressed like a Hasidic Jew, has the long beard and the black and the hat and things of that nature. And he's talking to other Jews. And he's saying things like, yeah, did you check out that advertisement at the market? There's some great prices there, huh? And you know what? There was this one guy who wanted me to sell him, who wanted to sell me something or other, a car, but I get the word, but I ussed him down. Now, what Peter was saying there, the word he wanted to insert was Jew. I Jewed him down. See, that's a terrible thing to say. But yeah, it's a very common racial slur. To Jew somebody means to cheat them or to short them somehow. And trust me, that goes long back in history, and I've spent way too much time talking about this, except for the fact that Jewish history is a significant part of a significant component of European history. It gets asked about a lot. And all those things I was talking about, are terribly wrong and insensitive and awful. But it was the way it was. Anyway, Roman numeral 3. Renaissance Italy was divided into 3 estates. This is worth making sure you know it. 3 estates. And that's a set of ideas that will come in handy when talking about the French Revolution, but 3 estates, 3 classes. And they're in this order: clergy, nobility, and everybody else. So, the first estate, priest, clergy, official members of the Roman Catholic Church. And it's the Roman Catholic Church, not any other church. The first estate, priests, enjoyed during this Middle Ages certain immunities in medieval societies. There was one kind of immunity, in other words, things they didn't have to do that everybody else had to do. Immunity of person. They could not be compelled to military service. In other words, if the town was under attack, the priest could hang back and say, go get them, guys. Killing a priest was considered a mortal sin. Oh, good word, mortal sin. What does that mean? Also called a cardinal sin. You know what mortal sin means? A mortal sin is a sin from which there is no forgiveness. So you commit this sin, according to the Roman Catholic doctrine, then you were going to spend the rest of eternity getting poked with a pitchfork, that kind of thing. B, immunity of place. They, meaning the priesthood, could not be taxed. That was a big advantage, yeah. They could not be taxed. And it'll be one of the things that really pushes for the French Revolution. The right to be tried by church authorities alone. The right to be tried in a church, and it doesn't matter what the priest did. I mean, the priest could commit any kind of crime. Whatever crime he did would be tried in a church court. And, or even if he was sued, he would end up in a church court. And which direction do you think the judgment would go? Yeah. The clergy represented less than 1% of total European society. Okay. And oh, yeah. Members of the priesthood actually, remember that they're the ones that walk around and collect the Sunday offering, 10% of everybody's income. And they were supposed to send most of that to Rome, but you can imagine that there was some dipping going on. Fact of the matter was, lots and lots and lots of people during this era wanted to be priests. Why? Well, let's see. In a day when, people were starving in Europe, being a priest meant that you got 3 squares a day, 3 square meals. Not only that, you had a decent place to sleep at night. You had some money in your pocket. And to be real honest, as time went on, one of the ways that the church had become corrupted was that it was not uncommon for priests to walk around with 2 or 3 or 4 women just following them and a bunch of kids. Not kidding. That it was pretty common knowledge, pretty accepted knowledge that the priest, that those were his women, and the children were his children. And you said, okay, so he had lots of women. Well, I hope that you do understand that in Roman Catholicism, priests take a vow of celibacy. Celibacy? No sex. No marriage, no sex. And so maybe the priests kind of were not exactly adhering to that. Okay, the second estate, the nobility. The nobility comprised from 2 to 5% of the overall population in Europe. Now, in the early days, the nobles were the ones that, when the kingdom or the manor was coming under attack, the nobles were the ones that led the soldiers to ward off the invaders. The days when the nobility were doing that were fading away. The nobles were just nobles. Their dad had been a noble, and somewhere down the line, their great-grandfather had, actually fought to keep them safe. And but those days were gone. As things settled down in Europe, the Arabs and the Magyars and the Vikings had kind of settled, and that was over with. And the nobility just, it's great to be noble. All right. Italian writer Baldassare Castiglione wrote a guidebook of sorts for the nobility, a very important book in 1528 called The Courtier. I should always underline. The Courtier, yes. Nobles had to be of noble birth from a heretical perspective, meaning that to be fully noble, you had to have both parents who were members of the nobility. Nobles had to be able military leaders when called upon. That's according to Castiglione. They had to be noble. They had to follow a certain code of higher conduct. Crapola. Yeah, right. The idea of knights being noble, all that, it really was more myth than reality. All right. The overwhelming majority of European society in Renaissance Europe were serfs and peasants. Serfs and peasants. And there's a difference. Make sure you know them. Serfs are pretty much slaves. They were actually tied to the land and were considered property. So if you were a serf, you actually were owned by the master, and you could not run away. Well, you could, but you'd be pursued. They, meaning serfs, could not legally leave the land of a lord to which they were tied. Although, as the towns in Europe began to grow, opportunities improved. Many of the serfs, or some of the serfs, would slip away when the opportunity presented itself to go to the cities where they could actually work for jobs that paid. And then there are peasants. And peasants lived on the Lord's manor. They're freemen. Their full name was freeman peasants. If they wanted to leave, they could leave. The problem with leaving was, where do you go? All the land is owned by somebody. You can't just go, I'm going to just farm this here. Nobody seems to be using it. No, that's a good way to get killed. So if you're a peasant, you lived on the Lord's manor and you paid him rents. Now, both serfs and peasants had to pay a significant amount of their crop produce to the Lord, as well as, of course, the serf paid more than the peasant, as well as serfs and peasants had to pay work to the Lord, had an obligation. In France, it was called the corvée. It was a tax collected in work. In Austria, it was called the robot. No. I mean, it was a tax collected in labor. In fact, depending on what time of year it was, you had to work anywhere from 2 to 4 days a week on the Lord's property, tending the Lord's crop or doing his projects or whatever. The rest of the week, you could do your own stuff. And then after you did your own stuff, you'd have to give some of that to the Lord. It was not a good situation. Okay. Peasants left their feudal estates as cities continued to offer more opportunities than their subsistence existence on the manor. Okay. What many do not know or appreciate is that slavery existed during the Renaissance. Um, I think I think that that's a good place to stop. I think so. I'm not sure. I can never tell how long this lecture is going, but just give me a sec, please. They need to have some kind of time clock on here that says how long you're yakking for, Mr. Horton. Um, no. They should have it. Anyway, yeah, I think we'll end there and we'll pick up with slavery tomorrow because it's a big subject. And so, yes. So that does me for today. Um, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. Click. Okay, how do we do this? Oh, yeah, we go to. Show me there. Oh, yes.